Thank you. Mr. Yang.
Hello, CSA. It's such a privilege to be able to address you. Who did not dream about being a school principal when we were young, or a school administrator, or someone who's helping make our schools successful every day? My family is a product of your schools. My wife grew up in Queens, went to public school, and then went to Stuyvesant. And our son Damien goes to public school right now. I understand the importance of what you do, and I want to support you. I think that principals are closest to the action. You know what's going to be successful in your schools, what's going to work. I applaud you all for stepping up and saying that we should be doing more to keep our schools open during this time, because you know that it's the children that are most in need that are falling further behind right now. Thrilled to be here to address you all, and thank you for the work you do. My family is one of the hundreds of thousands of families that benefits from it every day.
Think 5 years from now, when you're finishing your first term, 9 years from now, 2030, when you're finishing your second term. And what's the one priority, the one contribution that you would be most proud of accomplishing? And how would that be the same or different what we've gotten from Mayor de Blasio? Mr. Yang.
In one word, outcomes. And you do this work every single day. You have kids who are showing up, and then the simplest outcome is, are they graduating? But then you have this sinking feeling is that even if they do graduate, what does their life look like, or what does their professional path look like post-graduation? And there is this new term about this school to prison pipeline that we all fear is all too real. So what we need to do is we need to support the things that are working in our schools that you all know better than anyone, and then funnel our kids towards opportunities that will be resilient and appropriate for them based upon what the economy needs. And Ray is right that we have a very large, diverse economy. We need to be trying to prepare our kids for the jobs that will be there for them, and not pretend, frankly, that a four-year college is going to be the right fit for all of them. There are too many kids who are showing up who feel like they're being put on an assembly line that is not the right fit for them. And I know this in part because one of my boys is a special needs child. He's a very, very particular fit. And there are many, many thousands of families in the same boat as my family. We need to be trying to develop programs that are a better fit for our children, also a better fit for the modern economy.
Thank you. The question is, how would you address inequities that exist for both staff and students in CBO-based early childhood programs, different from their counterparts at the DOE?
You all have been put in a nearly impossible situation where you're being asked to educate our children every day, but you know in your heart of hearts that 2/3 of their outcomes are determined outside of school. And a lot of that is before they even show up day one for kindergarten. It's one reason why we all know and celebrate that Mayor de Blasio's signature achievement of universal pre-K was so invaluable, because that extra year helps prepare kids for success, particularly children of color in communities where this pipeline is most important. So we should be trying to build on that success. And my signature proposal is a plan to alleviate extreme poverty in New York City. And we all know that those communities are going to be communities of color, that this $1 billion that we have pledged is going to end up preparing them to be able to show up to your schools more able to learn. Because those 2/3 of educational outcomes are based upon parental income, stress in the home, number of words read to them when they're a child, the type of neighborhood. We know that these are the factors that actually are giving these kids a chance to learn or not. As a parent of 2 young children, I know that what happens to this child before they show up at age 4 or 5 is crucial, and we need to invest in them then in order for you to be able to do your job.
I'm sure everybody would like to know whether you want to have the NYPD retain jurisdiction, supervision of school safety agents. But more than that, how would you ensure that our students are in an optimal learning environment where they feel emotionally and physically safe? Mr. Yang.
Oh, this question made me think of last year when we were notified that there was going to be an active shooter drill in my son's school. And my son was 4 years old at the time. And I found myself thinking, is this actually going to elevate our community's sense of safety, or is it going to elevate our sense of anxiety or fear? And it made me think that we were going a little bit too far in one direction. And I thought it should be up to both the principal and the school administrators, as well as the parents and communities, whether we wanted to adopt that kind of active shooter drill or whether we thought it was more deleterious for our children, because I got the sense that our administrators actually were not fans. So that gives you a sense. I think we need to be more independent. Like right now, there's this, I think, political pressure to feel like you're doing all you can to quote unquote keep our children safe, but sometimes those measures may not be having their desired effect, either by the data or in the mental health of our children. In terms of NYPD's control of the security of some of these schools, I think that that also should be something that isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. I think it should be up to the principal, the administrators, and the parents, because there are some areas where that might be wholly appropriate and desirable, and others where they would prefer another approach.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the big issue before we get to the COVID response. I want to talk about segregation. Segregation pervades the system. There are vast inequities based on race, ethnicity, gender, and wealth. So I would like to know from the panelists how you would deal with that, both in the context of gifted and talented tests and placement, but also in the larger area of general integration of our students.
There are a lot of things we need to do in this direction. I just want to share, though, a personal story. Again, as a public school parent, I think it's a mistake to get rid of a particular system of middle school screening and testing without knowing what comes next. Because I think parents generally crave a degree of certainty and visibility. And so if you're going to say, look, we're going to do away with these screenings, you should have an idea of what's replacing them, if anything. To me, the goal should be for our schools to reflect the incredible diversity of our city. I think, though, that some of these tests deserve to serve as a data point, but not the data point. So I think there are ways we can supplement them based on the background, the neighborhood, grades, essays, interviews, because our kids are not one score. I mean, we all know that having a real picture of the child would be very, very integral to actually finding the right school for them. And if we did it right, it would result in our schools being much more diverse and reflective of our communities. So that, to me, should be our goal. But I do think it's a mistake to get rid of some of these standards entirely, because I think the standards are a useful data point. They should just not be the only data point.
So let's move on to growing out of the pandemic. You wouldn't be taking office until next January. Hopefully we'll be toward the end of the pandemic, building out from it. So how would you deal with that? Students, teachers, school leaders, and staff are at the breaking point. You need long-term financial, academic, social, and emotional supports. What's the plan? And in that plan, I want to dovetail into a separate question, but it's really the same question. What do we do about funding that plan? I'll start with Mr. Yang.
The first thing we have to do is go to the federal government and make the case that New York has been giving more than it's been getting for decades, to the tune of $25 billion a year. And happily, I believe that we're actually in position to hopefully augment our resources over this next number of years, certainly in buckets like infrastructure and things that are going to be part of the Joe Biden plan. But hopefully some of those resources can flow to our schools. The reality is that we have all of these kids who have fallen further behind during this time. Studies have shown that online school is 30 to 70% less effective than in-person instruction, which we can all sense. But there are hundreds of thousands of our kids that have been getting not even that over this time. So we're going to need to make a Herculean investment of human capital, of resources, of mental health resources to try and help our kids speed up. And it's going to require three things. One, activating new resources, either at the federal level or the corporate level or the philanthropic level. Two, take the resources that we currently have and then stretch them further. And then three, try to build on the things that are working so that we can actually preserve the most vulnerable among us, to try and get the families back on their feet. It's going to be a monumental challenge, but these are the people, you all are the people that are going to be leading that in each of these schools. And I want to be your partner and supporter in that.
Thank you. Our members have lots of questions about mayoral control. One is, would you keep the current chancellor? And the other, of course, is, would you keep mayoral control? And if you did, how would you change your relationship to the chancellor, as well as to the schools and the governance system?
A mayoral candidate not wanting control of the schools would be like a principal not wanting control of something vital to your school's success. You know, of course, the mayor should retain control. And in terms of keeping the current chancellor, a lot of leadership is team building. And so what you want to do is build a team that you can trust, that you have confidence in, that does not preclude keeping someone who's in a current role. But in this case, this chancellor has not built up the proper relationships of trust and credibility with administrators, with the community. And so I would need to replace him.
Thank you. So the last question, and maybe the most important question, although we've really run through some great issues, are marginalized populations in our schools. And I'm talking about home insecure students, students with disabilities, English as a new language students, and LGBTQ and gender non-conforming students. So I want to take each of those groups, even though we often have overlap, and let each of you discuss how you would address the needs of one particular population.
We need to let folks know from day one that gender is a social construct, and it's not just boys and girls, and let folks know that from kindergarten, pre-K on. Train our teachers to be able to identify and support children who may be struggling with their gender identity in some form or another, and then identify individual mentors and resources for young people who are finding themselves in this way, because I think for many of them, a sense that it's going to be okay from someone who's older and has been through that here in New York City would be incredibly valuable. It's a continuous struggle because we know that kids often will be quite harsh and even cruel to folks that are different from them. And so we need to start young. We need to start very, very early and let people know that that gender is something that is not necessarily what some people were taught when they were very, very young, that it's not just boys and girls, that it's a social construction that is fluid.
Thank you. So we're at that point of closing. Mr. Yang.
Thank you again for everything you do every day for our children. I still remember my high school principal for sure, and I know that many of our children will remember you for the rest of our lives, for the rest of their lives. You're in a
good way, I guess, right?
I'm sorry?
In a good way.
Oh, of course, in a good way. They probably wouldn't remember you if we're negative. You all are in the practice of forming people, of forming human beings. You have a very sacred trust. You take our children, and then you make them stronger, healthier, better educated. You understand how best to manage your own schools, your own teams. You understand your teachers. You understand what's working. Our goal should be to create the conditions for you all to succeed. If you're in the practice of forming people, in my view, the mayor should be in the practice of empowering people. And that's principals, school administrators, and the folks that are closest to the ground that understand the ins and outs of what's working. You should tell us what's working, and then we should try and make your jobs easier. That will be my goal as your mayor.